Well, hello, and come along as we head back to the White House and visit with Ronald Reagan, a former actor and California governor who served as the 40th president from 1981 to 1989. Raised in small town Illinois, he became a Hollywood actor in his 20s and later served as the Republican governor of California from 1967 to 1975. Dubbed the Great Communicator, the affordable, Reagan became a popular two-term president. He cut taxes, increased defense spending, negotiated a nuclear arms reduction agreement with the Soviets, and is credited with helping to bring a quicker end to the Cold War. Reagan, who survived a 1981 assassination attempt, died at the age of 93 after battling Alzheimer's disease. Ronald Wilson Reagan was born February 6, 1911, in Tampico, Illinois, to Edward Jack Reagan, whose life spanned from 1883 to 1941. A shoe salesman, and Nellie Wilson Reagan, whose life spanned from 1883 to 1962. The family, which included older son Neil Reagan, whose life spanned from 1908 to 1996, resided in an apartment that lacked indoor plumbing and running water, and was located along the small town's main street. Reagan's father nicknamed him Dutch Boy, or Dutch, as a baby, saying he resembled a fat little Dutchman. Did you know? Among the items in display at Ronald Reagan's Presidential Library in California is a 6,000-pound graffiti-covered section of the Berlin Wall, given to him by the people of Berlin. During Reagan's early childhood, his family lived in a series of Illinois towns, as his father switched sales jobs, then settled down in Dixon, Illinois, in 1920. In 1928, Reagan graduated from Dixon High School, where he was an athlete and student body president, and performed in school plays. During summer vacations, he worked as a lifeguard in Dixon. Reagan went on to attend Eureka College in Illinois, where he played football, ran track, captained the swim team, served as student council president, and acted in school productions. After graduating in 1932, he found work as a radio sports announcer in Iowa. In 1937, while in Southern California, to cover the Chicago Cubs' spring training season, Ronald Reagan did a screen test for Warner Brothers movie studio. The studio signed him to a contract, and that same year he made his film debut in Love Is on the Air, playing a radio news reporter. Over the next 3 decades, he appeared in more than 50 movies. Among his best-known roles was the Notre Dame football star George Gipp in the 1940s biographical film Knute Rockne All-American. In the movie, Reagan's famous line, which he is still remembered for, was, "Win one for the Gipper." Another notable role was in 1942 in King's Row, which Reagan portrayed an accident victim who wakes up to discover his legs have been amputated and cries out, "Where's the rest of me?" Reagan used this line as the title of his 1965 autobiography. In 1940, Reagan married actress Jane Wyman, with whom he had daughter Maureen and adopted son Michael. The couple divorced in 1948. In 1952, he married Nancy Davis. The pair had 2 children, Patricia and Ronald. During World War II, Reagan was disqualified from combat due to poor eyesight and spent his time in the Army making training films. From 1947 to 1952, and from 1959 to 1960, he served as president of the Screen Actors Guild, or SAG, during which time he testified in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee. From 1954 to 1962, he hosted the weekly television drama series, The General Electric Theater. In this role, he toured the United States as a public relations representative for General Electric, giving pro-business talks in which he spoke out against too much government control and wasteful spending, central themes of his future political career. In his younger careers, Ronald Reagan was a member of the Democratic Party and campaigned for Democratic candidates. However, his views grew more conservative over time, and in the early 1960s, he officially became a Republican. In 1964, Reagan stepped into the national political spotlight when he gave a well-received televised speech for Republican presidential candidate Barry Goldwater, whose life spanned from 1909 to 1998. A prominent conservative, 2 years later in his first race for public office, Reagan defeated Democratic incumbent Edmund Pat Brown Sr., whose life spanned from 1905 to 1996, by almost 1 million votes to win the governorship of California. Reagan was re-elected to a second term in 1970. After making unsuccessful bid for the Republican presidential nomination in 1968 and 1976, Reagan received his party's nod in 1980. In that year's general election, he and running mate George H.W. Bush faced off against President Jimmy Carter and Vice President Walter Mondale. Reagan won the election by an electoral margin of 489 to 49 and captured almost 51% of the popular vote. At the age of 69, he was the oldest person elected to the U.S. presidency until our current president. But that will be in a later video. Anyway, Ronald Reagan was sworn into office on January 20th, 1981. In his inaugural address, Reagan famously said of America's then troubled economy, "In this present crisis, Government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem. After the more informal Carter years, Reagan and his wife Nancy ushered in a new era of glamour in the nation's capital, which became known as Hollywood on the Potomac. The First Lady wore designer fashions, hosted numerous state dinners, and oversaw a major reduction of the White House. Redecoration. Just over 2 months after his inauguration on March 30th, 1981, Reagan survived an assassination attempt by John Hinckley Jr., who was born in 1955 and is still alive. A man with a history of psychiatric problems, outside the hotel in Washington, D.C. The gunman's bullet pierced one of the president's lungs and narrowly missed his heart. Reagan, known for his good-natured humor, later told his wife, "Honey, I forgot to duck." Within several weeks of the shooting, Reagan was back at work. On the domestic front, President Ronald Reagan implemented policies to reduce the federal government's reach into the daily lives and pocketbooks of Americans, including tax cuts intended to spur growth, known as regiments. He also advocated for increases in military spending, reductions to certain social programs, and measures to deregulate business. By 1983, the nation's economy had started to recover and entered a period of prosperity that would extend through the rest of Reagan's presidency. Critics maintained that his policies led to budget defects and more significant national debt. Some also held that his economy programs favored the rich. In 1981, Reagan made history by appointing Sandra Day O'Connor, who was born in 1930 and is still alive, as the first woman to the U.S. Supreme Court. In foreign affairs, Ronald Reagan's first term in office was marked by a massive buildup of U.S. weapons and troops, as well as an escalation of the Cold War, which spanned from 1946 to 1991, with the Soviet Union, which the president dubbed the Evil Empire. Key to his administration's foreign policy initiatives was the Reagan Doctrine, under which America provided aid to anti-communist movements in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. In 1983, Reagan announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, or the SDI, a plan to develop space-based weapons to protect America from attacks by Soviet nuclear missiles. Also on the foreign affairs front, Reagan sent 800 U.S. Marines to Lebanon as part of an international peacekeeping force after Israel invaded that nation in June of 1982. In October of 1983, suicide bombers attacked the main barracks in Beirut, killing 241 Americans. That same month, Reagan ordered U.S. forces to lead an invasion of Grenada, an island in the Caribbean, after Marxist rebels overthrew the government. In addition to problems in Lebanon and Grenada, the Reagan administration had to deal with an ongoing, continuous relationship between the United States and Libya. Libyan leader Muammar al-Gaddafi. During his second term, Reagan forged a diplomatic relationship with the reformed mind Mikhail Gorbachev, who became leader of the Soviet Union in 1985. In 1987, the Americans and Soviets signed a historic agreement to eliminate intermediate-range nuclear missiles. That same year, Reagan spoke at Germany's Berlin Wall, a symbol of communists, and famously challenged Gorbachev to tear it down. 29 months later, Gorbachev allowed the people of Berlin to dismantle the wall. After leaving the White House, Reagan returned to Germany in September of 1990, just weeks before Germany was officially reunified, and took several symbolic swings with a hammer at a remaining chunk of the wall. In November of 1984, Ronald Reagan was re-elected in a landslide, defeating Walter Mondale and his running mate, Geraldine Ferraro, the first female vice president candidate from a major U.S. political party. Reagan, who announced it was morning again in America, carried 49 out of 50 states in the election and received 525 out of 538 electoral votes, the largest number ever won by an American president candidate. After leaving the White House in January of 1989, Ronald Reagan and his wife returned to California, where they lived in Los Angeles. In 1981, Ronald Reagan President Library and Museum opened in Simi Valley, California. In November of 1994, Reagan revealed in a handwritten letter to American people that he had been recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Nearly a decade later, on June 5th, 2004, he died at his Los Angeles home at the age of 93, making him the nation's longest-lived president. In 2006, Gerald Ford surpassed him for this title. Reagan was given a state funeral in Washington, D.C., and later buried in the ground of his presidential library. Nancy Reagan died of heart failure in 2016 at 94, and was buried alongside her husband. And with that, I'll see you all in the next one.